Dude, we are going to energise the country.
Stop Brexit.
No more Mr. Nice Guy.
Another future's possible, but we've got to fight for it.
Order!
Hello and welcome to the Debated podcast. As always, I'm your host, Will. And in this episode, I'm delighted to be joined by a great British actor, director and writer, Reece Dinsdale. Welcome to the podcast, Reece.
Thank you very much, Will.
So the first question that I'd like to ask is about a work that you were involved in that has become, in the last few years, quite relevant and very topical. A lot of people have been talking about it, and that's Threads, which for people who don't know, is a film that was made in the 1980s about the run-up to an aftermath of a nuclear war, and it focuses on the detonation of a nuclear warhead over Sheffield. So I just wondered, how did you first become involved with the project, and what were your first thoughts of the script?
Well, it was 1984 when we shot it, in the spring, I think, early spring, late winter. And yeah, that's exactly when it was. And I'd been doing some work for 4 years. I left drama school in 1980 and things were cooking nicely. And my agent sent me a script that was written by the brilliant Barry Hines, who, for anyone who wants some point of reference, he'd written Cares, the wonderful film, Rites of Passage film up in Yorkshire that Ken Loach had shot some years before, which was based on his novel Kestrel for a Knave, and he adapted it for a screenplay. So when I got this screenplay for a thing called Threads, directed by, at that time, a kind of documentary maker, Mick Jackson, who went on after Threads to do things like Bodyguard in Hollywood and lots of wonderful projects. Anyway, so I got this script, and it was to play one of the two central characters, the young couple at the heart of the film. And we were all living at the time under the threat of nuclear war. I mean, it was the height of the Cold War. The Cold War had been going on for many, 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 many years, but between the Russian superpower and America, we felt trapped in the middle somehow. And CND and all the other things were at their height, and people were really frightened that something might go off if somewhat either side lost their marbles. So I got this script and I started reading it, and it was terrific. The dialogue was superb. The tension was just palpable from the off. But he just built it beautifully. These normal people, normal lives, ordinary folk, a working class lad and a slightly lower middle class girl who are having this love affair, and the two families coming together with the backdrop of a threat of nuclear war. So I read it. I went to meet with Mick Jackson, the director, and Barry Hines. We got on like a house on fire. And in those days, it was so simple. You know, you kind of got the job that day if it was yours. These days, you jump through hoops and have to meet so many other people and producers and do screen tests. It's daft. But those days, it's kind of the job was yours. And I knew from the off it was a very special script.
One of the things that mentioned there is that it is really able to empathise, and people are able to really sort of like relate to the situation that the characters find themselves in, because they are, ordinary people. You're not sort of like dealing with really high politics. Do you think that sometimes the effect of what happens with political decisions and the threat of war to ordinary people is sometimes perhaps not as much a part of drama, particularly drama that has such political undertones as Threads, with lots of work that has come out since?
Sorry, Will, do you mean that people don't identify their own situation with things that have come out? This is possibly. I just know that it was a unique time. I mean, I say unique, and in these latter days, with the North Korean leader and with Mr. Donald Trump, things have had a similar flavour, shall we say, in recent times. And so I think that even now people are very wary and fearful of what all it would take for something to go wrong in an instance. So I don't know, but I can only speak for that time, and it was a special time in that it was very worrying, and we did feel it. It was palpable. So I don't know whether we weren't as news. What's the word I'm searching for? Savvy as we are now. We're inundated with much more information through all the news outlets, social media, whatever it may be, and so maybe we've got our eye on things a little bit more, and we can make more informed decisions about what's going down. But then you couldn't. There was nothing like we have now, and all you saw was a front page of a newspaper or the BBC reporting that there was missiles going off here or threats from this warship to this and that. There were extraordinary times, and Threads just hit the nail on the head, as you said, because it dealt with ordinary people.
Do you think that? Because, of course, now we have series like Black Mirror that examine apocalyptic situations with every single episode. Do you think that part of the impact of Threads was the fact that, in a way, it was sort of a first of its kind? I mean, I know
Yes.
War Games was made about 20 years before, but it wasn't shown until after Threads. Do you think that that's part of why it had such an impact?
Yes, I absolutely. I just think there was nothing like it at all. It was so shocking. We were used to, play for today, really. Plays about life, gentle dramas about this, that, and the other. We'd not got even close towards things like Edge of Darkness, other brilliant things that came later. Or not to my mind, anyway. Yes, the Americans have made a version. Is it the day after? As well, and I don't know if that came before or after, I'm not sure. But it was a rarity. You didn't get such powerful TV drama like this. And it stood the test of time, I really think. I have not seen it I saw it about 12 months ago, and we made it in 84, so you do the maths. It's 26 years since I'd seen it, really. And you wonder if it was going to still hold. And by God, it does. I actually took my teenage kids. Thank goodness they were, 15 and 14 at least, and 17. I'd forgotten what the impact was like. In fact, I'm reminded daily on Twitter and things by many people who said we were showing it at school, and we really shouldn't have been showing it at school because it was the most harrowing, frightening, scary thing they'd ever seen. It took years to get out of people's psyche, but it does still stand. And of course, you can draw your own analogies now to all sorts of things. It's for nuclear attack, read coronavirus, whatever you want to do. For read, I don't know. You can get deeper and deeper and more and more political. There's a rise of the far right that's pretty scary as far where I'm sitting. So anyway, it's just one of those films that really did hit the nail on the head. It actually won the BAFTA award for best single drama in '85, the year after, and it's as powerful today as it was then.
Now I'd like to move on and talk about one of the two plays that we're going to be discussing in this podcast that you're in, and the first
I can remember them.
The first I'd like to talk about is The Absence of War by David Hare.
Oh, okay. Yes.
And the production that you were in was in about 2015. It was in the run-up to the general election. How did you first become involved with that production? Had you seen it before? What was your sort of like relationship to the script?
Well, first of all, there's an irony in it. Whether your listeners know of this, that many moons ago, as a young man, I did a series with John Ford, the great John Ford, a comedy series, Home to Roost. And after that time, John did a play, part of a trilogy that David Hare plays. It was called The Absence of War. He did it at the National Theatre. He did 3 plays in the trilogy. He did The Absence of War about politics. He did Murmuring Judges about the judiciary. And he did Racing Demon about the church. So John played George Jones, who is a kind of Neil Kinnock figure in The Absence of War. He played it all those years ago. Cut to 2015, and there I am being offered George Jones in The Absence of War. it's a kind of nice bookend as well, because way back then when he originally did the trilogy, David Hare, I also did the Littleton Theatre version at the National Theatre. I was in Racing Demon. So we were both in those kind of early productions. And I then, many years later, did a play in 2013 at the National Theatre. I think it might be the other play you're going to talk about, This House, in which was directed by Jeremy Herrin. Jeremy Herrin is a fabulous director. He's a very smart, very learned chap. And he'd met me some months previously. He didn't give me the job for something else. I thought I'd cooked my goose, and then lo and behold, a few months later, he's offering me this wonderful role in This House. We did that. It was a huge success. And on the back of that, Jeremy said he wanted to work with me again, and he had a great project for me. And that project was The Absence of War. He'd, by this time, taken over a great theatre company called Headlong, and they were going to take this out on tour. And he offered me the part. Ironically, the very same day, I was offered Uncle Vanya in a production somewhere, and I had this big choice to make. But I opted for the George Jones role for a few reasons. But basically, I'd loved working with Jeremy. He got my political juices flowing a little bit, which I'd never really felt I was a political animal until This House. And David Hare, the writer of Absence of War and Racing Demon that I'd done all those years ago, David Hare had kind of semi-directed the play Racing Demon with me in it, with Richard Eyre. And so we met together, David Hare, Jeremy Herrin, the director, and myself, and David was delighted that I was coming back, because he also loved the lineage from John Thor right through to me. He thought it was a beautiful two bookends for his production that hadn't been revived, really, in any major form for all those years. That was a very long-winded answer, Will, to your question. I'm sorry about that. But we got there in the end, and that's how it came about. So it came about via Jeremy Herrin asking me to play that particular role.
You mentioned, of course, that John Thor played the part. I just wondered, did that in any way, because, of course, his performance was also filmed as part of Scream 2. I wonder, did you watch his performance? Did that in any way influence your performance? Well,
No, I didn't, because I thought that was wrong. And also what they'd done quite cleverly, we were going up to some real northern heartlands at Liverpool and then Glasgow with the play. And George Jones was written as a South London character. As the leader of the Labour Party. I think just to throw people off the scent that it was kind of Neil Kinnock-ish, the character. And John wasn't a Londoner, so he played it London, but it wasn't his natural accent. And they wanted me on board, and they just felt, well, if we're going up the heartlands of the north, let's use what Reece has got best, and let's really engage the actor with the character fully. And it was, so I usually use my natural accent. So I did it in a very different fashion. I thought if I watch John, I'll worry if I'm not doing this or that right. You've always got to put your own stamp on it, and that's exactly what I did. So I left John alone. However, it was rather nice to have him kind of sitting on my shoulder, I think, as a friendly ghost, and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
You mentioned that the character is Neil Kinnock-esque, and it is, of course, the play based on the 1992 election. I just wondered, was there any particular leader of the Labour Party that you had in mind with the portrayal, or did you just want to sort of like put anything like that to the back of your mind and just do it as the character was written?
I don't think I did use it. I don't think I did. I mean, you're aware of the likeness to Kinnock, and people many reviewers had mentioned that with the original production. So it was common knowledge that it was kind of around that. Although David will swear to this day that it's not, and it was just his take on what was happening at that time within the Labour Party. I think as an actor, you unless you are specifically told this is Neil Kinnock and you have got to do an impersonation of Neil Kinnock, then you'd be wise not to. And I just use the text always as an actor. I just use what's there, what I can bring from the text to me, what aspects of me I can use with the character, but also then you have to find bits that are different, and you have to fill in the holes there. So it's like a big jigsaw puzzle. It's like a big Rubik's cube when you're building a character. So I did it for myself, but all the clues come from the script. So I built it from David's words, not from something I imagined. Totally.
There's at the beginning of the play, the opening scene, the scene at the cenotaph, there is this great moment when you have the person who's commentating describing, obviously the different leaders are laying down the wreaths and how the absence of war has affected them in the way that war affected past generations. Do you think that with what has happened since 1992, and obviously there have been conflicts around the world that have, really reawakened for people what it feels like to go to war. Do you think that sort of like sense of war perhaps detracts at all from the script, or do you think that we are still living in a time when there is this feeling of, that there is this absence of war that generations obviously who fought in the Second World War and the First World War didn't feel because they were involved in such worldwide conflicts?
I don't know. It was very difficult. It's a kind of nebulous title in some ways. Is that the right word? It's kind of, what does it really mean, the absence of war? I asked David, because I thought, I'm going to clear this up in my head. What is this? What is it called, the absence of war exactly, David? And I asked, and I actually offered the answer. I said, is it just when there's an absence of war, we play politics more? Is that what you're trying? And he said exactly that. He said, it's in an absence of war, we do politics. The British do politics, and so I don't really know to answer your question. Really, I have to be honest. You've taken me a little bit by surprise because I haven't read the play. Or we're funny beings, actors. I haven't read it since I did it, and I haven't thought about it since I did it. And do you know what you do? You kind of cancel and continue. As soon as you've done a job, the lines go, the kind of meaning of the play goes, all the rest of it. So I'm probably your worst nightmare. That I'm probably not going to give you any intelligent answers to anything you ask me about such things. I remember watching recently on YouTube. Somebody had sent me a clip, which was a trailer that we filmed for the piece. It was George, it was me. It was me talking to camera just about what the essence of the Labour Party and the Conservative Party was. And I thought how powerful it was. You can find it on YouTube if you search. I think it'll just be absence of war. You can put Reece Dinsdale, you can put Headlong in. And there's this wonderful speech in the middle of it where he just explains the difference between the two. It was very powerful stuff. I mean, David is a brilliant writer. He's a very smart man, a very educated chap, and his heart is very much in the right place politically. A lot of people wouldn't agree, and it's exactly the same now as it was then. That's the problem with politics, especially the Labour Party. We can never agree. It says something in that speech about the Labour Party believes in justice, but no two people can agree on what justice is, what justice means for people. And I find it extraordinary sometimes that we're so at war all the time with each other. In fact, I get more vitriol thrown my way from supporters of what is supposed to be our joint own party than I do from the opposition. It's just so sad, I suppose people would call you a centrist or left of centre, but it's very sad when I just feel without power you can't help the people you're purporting. Is that right? We're purporting to represent. If you really care, if you really, really care about human beings and about the less privileged in society, about folk who are just being trampled on in every fashion, with poverty, with lack of jobs and wages, you really, really care, get somebody into power that is going to reverse so many decisions that have been made by a Tory government. And so, I don't want to fall out with anyone. I don't treat politics. I don't try to treat my own party as a warring war ground, a battlefield. It's just so sad, but it seems to be that's the way it is, and it was always that way back in when David Hare wrote this play.
Mm. You're talking about sort of like the infighting, and that is very much a part of the play. And of course, when you were touring with it in 2015, run up to a general election, and you saw a Labour Party that was in many respects divided. Do you think that through art we can and play? Do you think we can express the sort of inner turmoils that sometimes can't be properly dealt with in politics?
Well, they're all too busy fighting in real life, so it's nobody's listening to each other. In art, in a play, and over the course of 2 to 3 hours, David Hare's no mug. He gives you it from both sides. He doesn't paint a rosy picture about things always. He'll give the good and the bad. And James Graham, who wrote This House, did exactly that. I mean, in a brilliant way. Balanced argument, balanced views shown in a film or on a stage about politics is probably a very good arena for things, because you can quietly, gently just take it all in and maybe come to some decisions. But we're also bullish in the political arena on social media and this, that, and the other. I'm quite a gentle chap, really, and I don't I don't cause offence, I hope, to anybody on that on Twitter. But when it comes to politics, they're the only people I do feel that you can get a little bit aerated with, because they are accountable. And so unfortunately, that's the forum. When I get aerated, when I get a bit cross, when I get a bit kind of accusatory, it'll be about politics, because I feel the injustices in society, and I think, why should I be quiet? I'm a human being, I'm an ordinary member of the public, and I can say what the hell I want if I feel that people are pulling the wool over our eyes and lying to us, and people aren't being served and cared for. So,
you mentioned This House there. I'd like to move on and discuss that. What did you first think when you were reading the part of Walter Harrison? What were your first impressions of him as a character?
Wonderful character. Oh, such a terrier. I'd seen the play because they'd done it in the Cottesloe, first of all, which was the smaller space at the National. They've changed names and all sorts now, but they were basically the small, more experimental space of the Cottesloe, the middle, more Pross Arch thing of the Littleton, and then the massive Olivier stage, which holds about 1,200 people in a kind of thrustish stage. And I'd seen the original production because they'd asked me if I'd be up for playing the takeover part, from moving from the Cottesloe into the Olivier of Walter Harrison. So I went to see it, and it was an old mate of mine who actually was playing the part, and he was brilliant. He wasn't available. They wanted me to do it. I just thought, this is an incredible opportunity. My friend was a Londoner, but famous for actually doing a Northerner, so he was more than qualified for it. But I just thought I would have my own. I really would have my own. I would be my element here. Walter Harrison, for those who do or don't know, was a famous, probably the greatest deputy chief whip that ever lived. He was renowned. He was infamous nearly because he was such a terrier, he was not brutal in any way, but he made sure those guys went through the lobbies. They weren't missing. He'd use any method he could to get guys to the Houses of Parliament and go through the lobbies and vote for the Labour Party. I thought, because I was behind all the rest of the cast that stayed on to come into the Olivier, I was the only new actor. I thought, I'd better get up to speed here. So what I did was, and remember, I come from a place called Normanton, which is just outside Wakefield in West Yorkshire. It's my home territory. Walter Harrison was the local, I think he was Dewsbury Wakefield MP. And so it was my neck of the woods. I come from 5 miles away from where he comes from. So it was very much in my territory. And I thought, what can I do to bring myself really up to speed with the other actors, because they'd done such research and such background on it, and that wasn't available to me, because when we were in rehearsals, it was a very short period to remount it. So I contacted, Walter had just died in the previous year, but I contacted his family in Pontefract, which is in West Yorkshire. And I went up there, and they were so kind. They invited me to dinner one night, and the whole family, sons, daughters, in-laws, all grandchildren, came to dinner, about 10 of us around a table. And they thanked me because they said they hadn't had a chance to talk about Walter in such a fashion as a family since he died. It was the first time they got together. So it was very cathartic, very, very wonderful for them. But they took me into their home, and they gave me all the information I required about Walter. They gave me some of the most wonderful personal paperwork, photographs, mementos, for me to kind of get under his skin. They gave me a tape of him walking and talking, and it was fabulous. And then, of course, you have to do as much of that as you can, but then you have to put your own stamp on it from the words, as I said about George Jones. It was an incredible experience. I was walking into a production that worked like clockwork. It was a success. It was the success of the year in British theatre. And I am walking in as a central role, playing opposite a fantastic actor called James Edwards, and many others, Phil Daniels and Vince Franklin, and it went on. So many good folk. And I had to come up to speed, but luckily I learned the part beforehand because I thought I have no chance to explore this too much in rehearsal. I hit the ground running with all this information. And the whole family, the Walter Harrison family, came to watch it many times and thanked me profusely for what I contributed to his memory. It was a great experience.
You mentioned how much of Walter was a distinct character, and his opposite number, the Conservative Deputy Chief Whip, Jack Weatherall, he's as much of a remarkable standout
certainly is,
character. How was it getting to grips with the dynamic between those two characters on stage? Because that relationship is really pivotal to the play. Yeah,
well, it's there in the writing to begin with. If it wasn't there in the writing, you're trying to paint that on top, that's not going to work. So James Graham, who is a prolific writer of mainly political drama, a youngish man, actually, how he knows all this stuff about things before he was born, I'll never know. But he is quite an extraordinary guy. So his words and his play and his structure of the play, beautifully created, is a manna from heaven for an actor. However, you're always running the risk that two actors don't gel. They don't find it. They're not working off the same kind of intellect or whatever. I'm very happy to say that James is a smart boy with a beautiful track record. He's done so many great things. We were a good match for each other, but we were on the same team. That's how it works as an actor. If we were playing like the characters and fighting one another, if our egos are in the way, it'd be no good. We weren't like that at all. He's a glorious man. We just started talking and doing it, and it worked. And I'd seen him do it. Remember, I had that advantage of seeing. I knew how good he was, and so I had to come up to the mark. But it's written like that. They go head to head, and neither wins really. It's such a beautiful piece. I don't want to spoil it for everyone because it's coming on, as you know, on the National Theatre release on YouTube on the 28th. James, I've got just a great respect for. Jeremy directed us beautifully, just brought us up and down. But the synchronicity was fantastic. And I loved playing it. Walter is probably right up there in the top 3 or 4 characters that I've ever had the pleasure of playing.
You mentioned the synchronicity there, and just the gel that he's just so well done. He's so perfect in both of your performances. And there's one particular scene that I really like, which is the scene when you're comparing notebooks. And it really sort of like sums up both characters so well. I just wondered how is it sort of like rehearsing that, because that's sort of, it's such a.
Remind me. He has a big clipboard or something, and all written down, doesn't he? And am I saying it's all up here in the head or something? A tiny little thing, or I've got this little piddly thing that and he mocks it and things. I don't know. That's part of the humour. It's just great fun. I mean, you obviously remember the scene that was funny and summed us up to a T. But yeah, there were so many things like that. I mean, my favourite scene, of course, is the pairing scene at the end.
Yeah, and
it's just dynamite when they. The tension is phenomenal, and you could. He goes in there like a bull in a china shop. Does Walter to demand this that he pairs somebody off because it's the way it is and the way it should always be, and he gives him hell for it, and Jack turns around and he gently just says okay, and when I was doing it in the theatre, the audience were just like, oh my God, and the two of them come together as equals. And it's beautifully written, beautifully done. It was just a joy to play. Yeah.
And there's that great scene. After that is towards the end of the scene.
You remember it better than I do, Will. You tell me what it was about.
The scene towards the end with Doc Broughton.
Heartbreaking stuff. When he knows he needs him, and he goes up north, and he's on his deathbed, isn't he, Doc?
Yeah.
And he knows he needs his boat, but he couldn't get it. He couldn't get him there. That's right, isn't it? And he goes up and tells him that I won't spoil it for whoever doesn't know, but he tells him some truth, and it's heartbreaking, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, I used to look forward to every single second of that play, because the beauty of it, of course, is that it's got a live rock band on stage as well. It's total theatre. This is total theatre. The play is as funny as hell, and it's as heartbreaking as you like, and informative as like nothing else I've known about politics. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And the Doc Broughton scene, genuinely every night I had tears in my eyes playing him because it was so heartbreaking.
Yeah. And for anyone who actually wants to watch the play, it's being streamed on YouTube on the National Theatre's YouTube channel from the 28th of May to the 4th of June. So I would highly recommend, and I think Reece would as well, that anyone who...
I'm going to watch it, by the way. Obviously, I've never seen myself do this, but I'm probably terrible. I'm living in a deluded...
You're not. We're coming towards the end of the podcast. It's been great speaking to you, to Reece. And I've got
Sorry if I waffled on.
No, you've not. I've got one final question for you. Okay. I know, like myself, you are a great admirer of Keir Starmer. I think anyone who follows you on Twitter can tell that. I just wondered, is there one thing over the coming months or one policy that you would like to see him pursue, or just something that you really want to see him?
It's not policy. I want him to remain true to the Labour Party policies that have been over the last number of years. I think there's nothing wrong with the Labour Party's policies. What I don't want him to do is to fall into the trap of what a lot of members want him to do, which is to rant and to rave and to give the Tories what they want, which is somebody completely out of control who is not hitting the nail on the head. Do what you're doing now. It's I think it's a terrible phrase. I hope it's not in any way racist, but please forgive me if it is. But it's softly catchy monkey. Yeah. Don't fall into their trap. He has got a great brain. He's doing it slowly. You can't, in the middle of a pandemic, start ranting and raving, and because nobody will have any sympathy for anybody doing that and pulling a government to pieces in a kind of you murderous whatever blah blah blah. Yeah. He's just picking faults. He's telling truths, and he's just holding them to account very quietly, and it's just a question of time. You don't strike now. It's probably not the right time to go all guns blazing, but you just start picking off the opposition over time, and when the time is right, bang, you get there. We've leaned so far to the right, people don't want to just jump back. They won't jump back to a Labour Party overnight. They've got to be persuaded that the right people are worth supporting. A lot of the people in the party don't even believe he is themselves. I happen to. I don't want to fall out with anybody about that. It's opinions. We're all allowed them. I just feel we've finally got somebody who can not only match him but take him on without bluster and tear him to pieces. Really, I think that's what I want him to do. Yeah. Carry on doing what he's doing.
I think that's a great response. Thank you once again for being on the podcast.
It's been my pleasure, Will. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to the podcast. Don't forget that you can subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, Podbean, or YouTube. You can follow us at Debated Podcast on Twitter, like us, Debated Podcast on Facebook. And if you want to email us, either about appearing or making a comment or reaction to the episode you've heard or any other episodes, then email us thedebatedpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you for listening. I hope you listen to the next one.